Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast. And I'm just so excited that you're here. We are just beginning a brand new series all about the 7 essential steps that you need in order to have your first group, or maybe your second group, or maybe your third group. Or as we talked about last week, a lot of these same principles can be used for any kind of project that you're putting together. I just heard from somebody that was talking about using these principles for a mission team. Awesome. They're getting ready to head out of the country in a couple months, and they're trying to make sure that they get themselves together before doing this huge project, and they're trying to build community. But it's really neat because we've done some work together, and they said, Bethany, like the main leader was like, where has this been? Like, a lot of this seems like so common sense, but as they mentioned, they didn't even have a purpose. They're like, well, yeah, our purpose is to go overseas. And they spent time last week all about, hey, okay, that's not exactly the greatest purpose of this group. That's not going to keep us motivated to keep showing up when things get hard. So what purpose can we really come up with as a group that's going to keep us motivated? How awesome is that? How awesome. I'm just so excited. So I can't wait to hear what this group gets to do. And I'm just so excited. And I want to go on a mission trip. If anybody's out there, just putting this out there, if anybody's out there planning a mission trip and they would love for me to come, please let me know. I would love to come speak. I would love to just help out with BBSs. Oh my goodness, I would love that just so much. So let me know. I would love to be able to go on a mission trip of some sort. So total side pivot. Thank you for letting my ADHD go there with you guys for a minute. So last week we talked about purpose. This week we're going to be talking about group guidelines and establishing group guidelines. That's step number 2. And again, if you haven't already gotten the download of all of these steps, it's free. It's on the BethanyBoring.com website. Because as you know, I'm a Christian mental health coach, and I work specifically with coaches and counselors and mental health professionals and pastoral care leaders that want to form and experience deep life transformational group communities. And so this is a passion of mine, and I get asked these questions all the time. Okay, Bethany, I want to start a group. How? Or why don't I have the right members? Or why am I having these troubles? Or why is this happening? And so a lot of times when I'm working with people, we go through these key guidelines right here, and we camp out at some of the later ones, but we wouldn't have to camp out at a lot of the later ones if this pre-work wasn't done correctly. So I'm trying to help you hear that. I'm trying to help you prevent some of these problems that happen down the road. And some of these problems that happen down the road are inevitable, and you just have to walk through it as a group. And sometimes you need that help, and you need that guidance, and you need that experience of a group. So all that to be said, let's go back and talk about guidelines. Now, obviously, guidelines are important because of why? Because they help us get to where we want to go, correct? Some of that, but also it helps like the formation, like any kind of body of people, they have a governing body. They have rules and regulations in order to keep the sanity in place. I know a lot of people in Florida don't like the red lights, don't always abide by the red lights. And that's when crashes happen. That's when accidents happen. That's when things occur that we don't like to occur because people believe that they're better than the rules that are put in place. And so the reason these rules are put in place is, one, it reinforces the purpose. So again, we go back to last week, each step builds on one another. So it reinforces the purpose. It helps the group get to where they want to go, but it also keeps everybody on the same page. So it's actually a reproduction of the purpose in the steps that everybody needs to be abiding by every single week showing up. So for instance, one guideline that I hear a lot of times in groups is, we will start at this time, this specific time. So my question for a lot of those groups are you actually doing that? And what's funny is that some groups are like, well, we want to make sure that everybody's present. No, you lead by example. You reinforce these guidelines by example. So if you're going to say you're going to start at such and such time, you start at that time. And if they're late and they'll learn. It's amazing how many group members learn, oh no, I missed the first 5 minutes, and that was like the crucial minutes, and it's my fault. It's your fault that you were late, and I'm so sorry. But our group is not going to wait just because this one person is late every single week. That's, some groups do decide to wait. But again, what does that reinforce? Your purpose. Does that reinforce why you're doing what you're doing? Another guideline, which is very crucial, especially for a lot of the groups that I lead, is safety and security and privacy. And so those are guidelines that we talk about being a safe place. But get ready, because I have had to, and a couple times now, I've had to go approach a group member that might have been sharing stories that weren't theirs to share. I know in some of our confessional community and story work groups, we do have a rule that yes, you can share the transformation that's happening in your life, in your story that you are sharing. You cannot bring somebody else's story out into public. That is not your role. You cannot do that. And so a lot of times, like, we may say that, but sometimes we even get confused when we're sharing stories on podcasts or when we're sharing stories elsewhere. If we don't have that person's permission, we don't get to share that. So a lot of times it's even with that promotion, because I've seen some groups, and I don't like this because I've been in a couple of them, where they go and they get all the way to the last session. They said, okay, now we're going to do this, and we may record a portion of it. It's good if you tell those people that ahead of time, even at week 1, say, hey, by group number 6, we would like your permission to record some of this session. But once you're actually already on there and you're saying, hey, we want some testimonies and we would like to record, it's really awkward for the person to go, yeah, no, I don't want mine recorded. That just makes it's hard. That provides some tension. And I didn't realize what I was doing until later on, because I started doing the same principle. Like, that's a great idea to be able to get people's videos and testimony videos. It's a great idea to do it. And then I realized how uncomfortable it would make me feel sometimes. And I went, that's not the greatest way. I don't want to do it that way. And so sometimes, instead of doing that, I will arrange Zoom sessions, or I will connect with people one-on-one and say, hey, I would love to have your video testimony. And I know how hard it is sometimes to be able to, like, talk to the camera without somebody else on the other end. Would you mind if we just spent some time one-on-one? And if you like what you say, that's great. We'll use it. If not, we'll scrap it. And just want to know how you're doing. And so that is a lot of times what I do. And I'm very front forward and honest. Sometimes I'm not getting the best. Like, I feel like sometimes in our groups, we get some of the better stories, like in our groups. And I'm like, but part of that is because they're in that group. They're in that trusted environment. They're in that safety environment. And as much as they want to share that with other people, sometimes you can't reproduce the group in front of a public audience, because it's not the same. It's just not the same. And so that being said, even in the privacy aspect, you really have to go back and really process, okay, am I really honoring what I put as a group guideline, even at the cost of maybe not getting the best promotion material made for my group? That's, the cost that you're willing to take. That's what you're willing to do. So that's another guideline that a lot of people put in place. Another one specifically for my groups, my tip community groups and my tip groups both, I put a number cap, and I have stood by that. There's only been a handful of times where I've had to say, no, I can't select more than that. Because I purposely keep my group small. I think the max, I'm not completely sure about this, but I think the max I currently have is 8. I think on my tip community group, which is a 6-month group, or even 12 months, depending on how people do that. That's my big group. It's 8. And then even my tip groups, which only go 6 to 8 weeks, they only have about 7 or 8 as well. Because for my purpose, I want people to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, to really experience what it's like being in a small intentional group. That is a purpose of mine. That is a heartbeat of mine. So I exemplify that by limiting the number of people in my group. And yes, when people do pay to be a part of my groups, they're paying for that individual attention, because there's only 6 to 8 people in those groups. They get more of my attention. They get more attention from the group members. They get a lot more out of it, as opposed to a group of 30 to 40 people, or even 20 people, or even 15 people. That's what part of that group is. So every group has a different experience. And so when you're asking people to join and sign up and be part of this, that is part of the experience that they're signing up for, is that number. Sometimes you want a bigger group. Like networking groups, You want it to be a bigger group because you want to meet more people. I know I'm in Christian Coaches Academy, which is by Faith to Influence. And that group is bigger than my little 8 to 9 people group, because it's a networking group. And each time I show up, they divide us into smaller groups and we get to meet different people. And even though I get to know some of those people in different ways, I don't think I've ever seen the same person every single week. I'm always meeting different people. And I'm not sure how many they have in that group. I think it's close to 100 maybe right now, but it's really neat because it's an endless sea of virtual coffee meetings that I get to meet with people that are doing like what I'm doing, or at least Christian coaches, and have that passion about the growing the kingdom of God. And I love it. And it fuels me and it fuels my fire. But again, that group wouldn't make much sense if it only had like 5 people. That's not the purpose of that group. You want to have a bigger group. But again, the huge thing about that group too is they're meeting in smaller groups as well. And so there's a strategy there in how they do that. And so again, how many people do you want in your group? What do you want that to look like? What theme do you want for your group? Like, for instance, I just used the CCA example. They start in a big group and then they get into smaller groups. And so does your group stay in a big group? Does your group only do small groups? There's so many different ways. And to put that in there right now as those group guidelines, again, it reinforces the purpose. And so that is why it's so important in that week number 1 to really nail down your purpose. Because again, just like I said back then, it not only helps you get through those hard times, but it keeps everybody on the same page, including you as a facilitator. It keeps you on the same page as the rest of the group. So now that you've got your purpose, I want you to work on your guidelines this week. I want you to just write everything down that you possibly could think of as guideline, and then decide, okay, is this something as a facilitator that I bring into this group to make this happen? Or is this something that I invite the group together to come up with each time that we do a group? So for instance, if you're doing a project with your kids, you may have some things that you bring in as a parent, but you may have them come into some ideas too. Like, hey, we want you to be able to clean your room every week. Okay, how does that get done? Well, I don't really care how that gets done, but I want this to go here and this to go here and this to go here. But the other stuff, if you guys come up with great ideas and it looks like this, that's fine. Okay, that's some guidelines that you put in place. I hope that makes sense. So you can decide how you do that depending on the purpose that you have. Is the purpose for your kids to do exactly what you want them to do and how you want them to do it? Or do you want them to have some freedom in how they do that and how they want them to look? That's up to you as a parent. That's up to you as that project guide. So I hope that makes sense. This can be such a wide variety of applications and purposes. But again, start out with the purpose and then put the guidelines. So I can't wait to see what you guys come up with this week. Again, if you want the workbook for this, you can download it at BethanyBoring.com. It's there for free and would love to have you guys work through this with us. So have a great week and can't wait to see you back here for week 3.